Lesson 15. Greetings, brothers and sisters. In this lesson, I want to talk about the relationship between the various elements or levels that exist in the spiritual hierarchy, a topic that we have already discussed. We will explore how the components of this hierarchy relate to one another, how they relate to living beings like yourselves, and what role extraterrestrials play in all this communication, which occurs in every direction. So, let's begin. It should be understood that the spiritual hierarchy only wants your good, that evolution be on the right path. This does not mean, however, that they have to do what you want or think they should do. Your minds are too small to grasp the full complexity of the universe, the Father's plans, and everything that involves you in this process. The elements that make up the spiritual hierarchy normally communicate upwards, as I mentioned in a previous lesson. And there is a feedback loop from the higher level to the lower level, informing it of what it needs to know, always in a way that it can understand. The complexity of the universe increases as one ascends. At this level of spiritual dimensions, as I said before, communication also occurs from the elements that make up the spiritual hierarchy to living beings. Living beings like yourselves, in this case individually, can communicate with you. In fact, the Father almost never communicates with living beings in the way he usually does. Your minds are not adapted to such high energy. Generally, direct communication is not possible. It is usually carried out by spiritual entities or inhabitants of the spiritual world. Let's say that to communicate with you, it is usually the angels closest to living beings. Those who are always watching, those who act as guardians and are the Father's first line of action in this physical dimension. If the living being has a highly evolved mind, may be able to communicate with an inhabitant of a higher dimension. This often happens if the mind has reached a required level, because the mind of a living being at that level already possesses sufficient intelligence to understand all the details, to grasp the data involved in the response or message that will be given. If communication is not facilitated by the closest angels, it is facilitated by those of a second or third level. This communication is usually done through meditation. Once the communication centers are activated, as I explained earlier, and sometimes also through dreams or during astral projection. In these cases, the encounters are simpler, but for there to be a lasting memory, a fairly evolved mental state is required, and this does not occur frequently. Therefore, I tell you this so that you can know that the normal form of communication is through the angels closest to you. Another form of communication is through technological methods involving more than one person. In that case, communication with beings higher than the spiritual level is possible, and you can speak with any entity as long as your mental state is appropriate. If someone is interested in speaking with the entity, for example, you must reach a high spiritual level, a high level of spiritual compatibility for the communication to be effective. When it occurs, it will be full of energy and very rapid. The mind must be accustomed to handling so much energy, otherwise it can produce great fatigue. This also applies to Ouija boards or telepathy, which are other methods of communication. It depends on your openness of mind and your abilities. Not all abilities can be awakened through meditation. Many are innate, present from birth, and therefore very difficult to learn. In the case of telepathy, as with other forms of communication, you must possess certain innate abilities and be able to open the energy centers responsible for communication. When one wishes to communicate with an evolved being, a guide, for example, or an evolved extraterrestrial, it's not necessary for them to have a physical body. There are many types and many levels of spiritual and physical evolution, but we will discuss this in a later lecture. Telepathic communication is easily achieved if the living being, possesses this capacity. Almost everyone does, because extraterrestrials have such immense mental power and so many mechanisms for communicating with us that the human mind would have to be far inferior for communication to be impossible, and that rarely happens. The mental energy of these beings is far superior to yours. Increasing this energy so that you can communicate with them telepathically is achieved through training, which can be done through meditation. As I mentioned before, you already know which energy centers need to be activated. Training can also be done during astral projection. There are places where tasks are performed that facilitate learning, and over time, this produces the desired effect. However, this doesn't replace meditation. Meditation is essential for effective mental growth and long lasting results. I've already said enough about communicating with these beings. I just wanted to emphasize that the spiritual relationship between the spiritual hierarchy and the extraterrestrials is quite frequent. This is because it allows them to carry out the Father's plans, as these extraterrestrials are intimately connected to the Father and spend a significant portion of their free time meditating. To achieve these results, they are highly evolved. The evolved extraterrestrials you call guides are far more advanced than human beings and are much more attuned to your mental capacities. They are closer to the Father. Feelings no longer matter as much. They have eliminated destructive feelings altogether, leaving only mental control. This control is governed by the energy of the universe, or the Father's energy, which controls their actions, making it even more powerful. You may be wondering why the extraterrestrials haven't manifested publicly. The answer is simple. The Father's plans don't follow that path. Your civilization is far inferior to theirs and could hinder your evolution. Civilizations learn by making mistakes, figuring out how to resolve them, and acting accordingly. Thus, lower planets like yours are planets of learning. That is their purpose, and this is their mission. This does not mean that there are no individuals capable of communicating with the Father. They are sent by the Father without being fully aware of it. Even if they are unaware of it, the Father has chosen them to carry out this mission, to spread the message of love and the revolution necessary to change the planet. Not all extraterrestrials who communicate with you have the same intentions. Some have positive intentions. They only want your evolution without interfering in your development, but helping where necessary. Others want to deceive you so that you fulfill their purposes and can use you for their malicious ends. It is not easy for you to distinguish between them. You will know over time by the actions they commit and by the type of spiritual lesson they impart. Those who usually have ill or ulterior motives and no good intentions at all tend to deliver an apocalyptic message. They want you to develop rapidly, without intermediate steps, and they don't care what you do to the planet. They'll tell you they want to save the planet, but that's not true. They only want to fulfill their own desires. There are other extraterrestrials known for the opposite, for having good intentions. These are the ones who are in no hurry to interfere in your civilization. They are also not so apocalyptic. They have hope and believe that by achieving a certain critical mass of people like you, things can be resolved. That's why we are now in the mental development phase for those who have been chosen. In these next 2 years, as I said before, an exceptional period will occur. Your future will be decided. They don't want all of humans to change. They already know what will be impossible. They only want a certain critical mass of people capable of reaching that level. And that will change reality, change the state of the planet and the state of humanity. Some countries are more advanced than others in this endeavor. Certain areas possess a greater amount of energy, allowing for a faster spiritual elevation. As you know, the Earth has an energy grid, not a perfectly square grid, but rather a network of closed polygons of various shapes and sizes. These polygons converge at points where these energy level lines, and on some of those lines, at certain points along those lines, is where the energy necessary to achieve that spiritual development is more easily produced. In your case, Spain is a much better place than others. It is far superior to other areas. The high plateau region has a great deal of energy for achieving those goals. In general, mountainous areas are very beneficial for achieving that goal, as are some areas of the valleys. I must also say that regarding extraterrestrials, there is another type of extraterrestrial who do not communicate with you in any way. They want nothing from you and only want to destroy you. They want to use your planet for their destructive purposes and exploit its raw materials. These are the ones who will never communicate with you, and they are the ones being attacked by the Galactic League, which is in charge of defending the cradle planets. So, to speak, the cradle planets are those that serve as learning grounds for ascending upwards. So, until next time, brothers and sisters,